All right, so we left off talking about the Cold War era and the Red Scare. We went over that in a couple other background videos. So I'm just going to take you to the book now, and we're going to really get into some who are the characters, what's kind of the basic plot overview, what should you be aware of. The book was set, as I said, either in 1999 or the 24th century. We're not exactly sure, but it introduces a new world in which society is controlled by the media and censorship is enforced by the government. Um, Individual freedoms are not accepted. The intellect is considered an outlaw. Television has replaced the family, in fact, so that you don't get confused. The wife will often talk about Mildred, the main character's wife, will often talk about her family, and that by family she's referring to her television, and the people on her television set are actually her family. Um, the fireman is a flamethrower, a destroyer of books, rather than insurance against fire. And there are rumors that, oh, firemen used to put out fires, but now they actually incite them. Books are considered evil because they make people question and think, and the people live in a world with no reminders of history or appreciation of the past. Their only reality is now just television and what the television set tells them. Okay, so here are our main characters. So you have Guy Montag. He is the main character. He's a fireman who's struggling to find his place in society. At one point, he's happy with it. His father was a fireman. His grandfather was a fireman. It's basically the family business. But instead of putting out fires, his job is to start them and to burn sometimes, and we'll see in this case, burn civilians alive in his quest to burn all of the unacceptable books. When he meets Clarice, however, he becomes conflicted. So we'll get to Clarice in a second. He is married to Mildred Montag. She characterizes all of the shallowness and mediocrity that is the world. She's completely immersed in an electronic world. She takes wild drives in her car. She considers that people on TV are her family. She wears seashells in her ears, which are basically like oh my goodness, AirPods, whatever they're called. Earbuds, AirPods. But they don't have wires, so they're just kind of like these little things you put in your ear and they talk to you. Imagine that. They play music 24/7, people sleep with them, and they distract her from her real feelings. This leads her to near suicide from a drug overdose. And in contrast to his wife, so she's actually a foil character, and we talked about foil characters in Hamlet. A foil character is one that stands for the real character, but that is kind of the perfect version of what that character ought to be. So a foil for his wife is this girl Clarice, and she is Montag's neighbor. She's young, she's 17. She refuses to conform to societal pressures, and she forces Montag to realize who he really is. It's very brief, but all she does is ask him questions. She simply says, "Did you know that there's a face in the moon? Have you ever heard the sound of the leaves as they crunch on an autumn afternoon?" And Montag kind of realizes, "I don't know. I've never thought about that before," because thinking is not something that people do. And so Montag eventually learns he's not the man he once thought he was, and he realizes he's incredibly out of touch with reality as a whole. Captain Beatty is obviously the captain at the fire station. He's like a high-ranking government official. He is Guy's nemesis or his enemy. He's also the opposite or the foil character throughout the novel as well for Montag. And he basically is the perfection. He is who Montag should be, were he perfected as a character and an individual. Um, you have Professor Faber. Faber is an old intellectual. He was a professor in his past life. He guides Montag, he helps him to resolve his internal conflict, and he encourages him to take action and change society. There is another picture of this mechanical hound. Again, people make it look really frightening. It's a machine. It resembles a dog, except that it has the ability to kill a man in seconds. Its main purpose is to seek out books and to hunt down fugitives. Symbols from this book are the phoenix. So in mythology, other cultures would include the story of the phoenix. It's a bird that is consumed by flames, but then it rises from the ashes as a symbol for renewal and hope. And I already kind of talked about that later. So in this book, it represents the hope that mankind will begin to seek knowledge after everything is destroyed. So obviously, fire is a symbol. It symbolizes two different things. One is destruction, and then at the same time, self-awareness and knowledge. So clearly they're killing and hurting and destroying things with fire. But at the same time, Clarice, the foil character, the one who represents life beyond this society. Reminds him of candlelight and fire. And she says when it's controlled, it symbolizes a flickering of self-awareness and knowledge. Um, Other symbols you're going to see is the hearth and the salamander. It's the title of the first section of the book. And so both hearths, so literally like a hearth where you light a fire, and a salamander are associated with fire. Salamanders, well, we'll get to hearth first. So hearths are traditionally the center of the home. It's the source of warmth. The firemen wear salamander imagery on their uniforms, and they call their fire truck a salamander because they were once believed to live in fire without being consumed by it. So that's kind of where those symbols come from, that now the fire, the destruction of books becomes like the center of the world, and that the firemen are indestructible by the fire that they basically throw on everything. Other symbols, the sieve and the sand. So a sieve is like this, where you sift something through and little sand particles fall through. It's the title of the second section. And it refers to Montag's childhood memory of trying to fill up a sieve with sand, but you can't. The sand represents knowledge that he's seeking. He wants to like grasp it and maintain it, but the problem is the sieve is his mind, and it's trying to grasp and retain the knowledge quickly, but it just keeps falling out because he hasn't been trained to learn or to think, and so it's kind of dissipating rather quickly. Other themes, mass media. It depicts the future of the United States society bombarded with messages and imagery of mass media. Instead of a small black and white TV screens that were common at the time in 1953, the characters in the novel live lives in rooms where the entire wall structure was like a television, and they can interact with characters as if they are family. Mildred spends most of her time with the seashells in her ears. It's like a miniature radio receiver that plays constant broadcasts of news, advertisement, music, and it drowns out the real sounds of the world. Other themes are censorship. Entertainment has replaced reflection and debate. Conformity versus individuality. Free thought and individuality versus kind of repression of that ability. Action versus inaction. What should you do? Just sit by and let something happen, or should you do something about it? Bradbury's predictions. Again, he said he wasn't intending to predict, but here's a couple of things that sort of came about in response to his text. So the people in this society, like I said, have thimble radios that are like earbuds or Bluetooth headsets. Members of the futuristic society are obsessed with their large flat screen televisions, as are today's technophiles, and the viewing screens of his stories take up an entire wall. The idea of electronic surveillance also pops up in his work way before closed-circuit television became a fixture in cities around the world. He warned people about how surveillance could be abused, and these echoes worry today. He criticized how reporters covered events in the news, which was reflected in modern news coverage because people wanted exciting events. They wanted to hear about things that were like pressing in the moment, that were kind of derogatory and heightened emotionally, and they didn't want to hear about what was true, and they didn't really care if what they were saying was true as long as it was entertaining. And so that's kind of the end of the overview that I wanted to go over. So throughout this lesson, we're also going to be looking at 3 vocab lessons. I have several lists, or a list of a few words. I think there's about 22 to 23 words per list, and you're going to have each of these per week to be working on and kind of developing, because I want you to continue working on your vocabulary. So you'll be seeing those as well. So that ends our discussion of sort of the background of the book, and now I'll get into part 1 and part 2 for this first week.